At exactly 10:00 a.m., a rookie NFL player pressed one button. 8 minutes later, millions of dollars were gone. Not slowly. Not over the course of a day. Not even over an hour. 8 minutes. By 10:08 a.m., every single item in Shedeur Sanders' new Nike collection had vanished. And at first, most people didn't even realize what had just happened. Because this wasn't a championship game. This wasn't a viral touchdown. This wasn't even his first regular season snap. This was a rookie fresh into the league, outselling the entire NFL merchandise market before most people had finished their morning coffee. Inside Nike, the numbers didn't make sense. Conversion rates were climbing faster than any athlete they had ever signed. Faster than veteran quarterbacks. Faster than Super Bowl MVPs. Even faster than some of their biggest NBA superstars. Executives thought it was a glitch. Then the servers went down. Warehouses that were supposed to supply weeks of sales were emptied before the West Coast stores had even opened their doors. Live dashboards started lighting up with sellout alerts that analysts had never seen before. And that's when the panic started. Because this wasn't just a successful merch drop. This was something Nike's models had never predicted. A rookie had just exposed a blind spot in one of the most powerful marketing machines on Earth. And the strangest part, it wasn't hardcore football fans driving this surge. It wasn't collectors. It wasn't even traditional jersey buyers. It was Gen Z. It was women. It was international buyers flooding in from Europe and Asia. People who normally ignored NFL merchandise entirely. They weren't buying a jersey. They were buying into something else. A name. An image. A mindset. And inside Nike headquarters, as emergency meetings were called and executives stared at live data in disbelief, one quiet question started circulating through the building. How did we completely miss this? Because what happened in those 8 minutes didn't just break rookie records. It signaled a shift. A moment where football stopped being the product. And culture took over. And once you understand what really caused this explosion, you'll realize this wasn't an accident at all. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Section 1, the 8-minute sellout, make it around 400 words. Here is Section 1, the 8-minute sellout = 400 words written for high retention. The clock hit 10:00 a.m. Eastern. No countdown. No flashy commercial. No primetime announcement. Just a quiet product page going live on Nike's website. At first, nothing seemed unusual. A few t-shirts. A few hoodies. A limited run of early designs carrying a new logo most fans had only seen on social media. Shedeur Sanders' first official collection. Analysts expected a solid rookie debut. Respectable numbers. A steady stream of early supporters. What they got instead looked like a system failure. Within the first 60 seconds, traffic spiked so sharply that monitoring tools flagged the launch as a potential cyber attack. By minute 3, the checkout queues were already stretching into the thousands. And by minute 5, warehouses started reporting shortages. Not low inventory. Shortages. Employees watching internal dashboards realized something was wrong when items scheduled to last all day were disappearing in seconds. Regional stock levels started hitting zero before anyone could even send an alert to corporate. By 10:08 a.m., it was over. Every size, every color, every single piece of the collection. Gone. No gradual decline. No late stragglers picking up leftovers. A complete sellout in 8 minutes. Inside Nike's operations center, confusion turned into disbelief. This wasn't how rookie launches behaved. Most first-year players took weeks to build momentum. Some never sold out at all. But Shedeur's numbers were accelerating, not slowing. The pace at which fans were completing purchases was higher than any athlete Nike had tracked in years. Higher than Pro Bowl veterans. Higher than Hall of Fame names. Higher even than several of their recent NBA signature launches. At first, executives suspected bots. Then they checked the data. Real names. Real cards. Real shipping addresses. From all over the world. Orders were coming in from cities that rarely bought football merchandise, from buyers who had never purchased an NFL product before. And that's when the realization hit. This wasn't a lucky drop. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't hype created by advertising. This was organic demand moving faster than Nike's own systems could react. 8 minutes had just rewritten every expectation they had about rookies, football, and branding. And the people watching those numbers climb understood something immediately. If this was only the first drop, they were already far behind. Because the sellout was just the beginning. And what happened inside Nike next would turn this into a full-blown crisis. Next. Here is section 2. Nike wasn't ready. 400 words, written in the same high-retention style. At first, Nike's team thought they were dealing with a routine surge. A few overloaded servers. A spike in traffic. Nothing they hadn't handled before. But within minutes, it became clear this was different. The system wasn't slowing down. It was collapsing. Checkout pages froze mid-transaction. Inventory trackers stopped updating in real time. Automated alerts began stacking faster than engineers could clear them. By the time the first technical team jumped in, entire product categories were already gone. Not low. Gone. Warehouses that had been stocked for what was supposed to be weeks of sales were now reporting empty shelves before the morning briefing had even started. One internal report later described the moment as a cascading failure. When one region sold out, the system tried to reroute orders to another. That region sold out too. Then another. Then another. Within minutes, the entire distribution network was chasing inventory that no longer existed. And the worst part, Nike's predictive models had completely missed this. Their algorithms were designed around historical rookie data. First-round picks, top quarterbacks, even generational prospects. None of them had ever shown behavior like this. Not even close. The models predicted a steady curve. What they got instead was a vertical spike. An anomaly so extreme that internal dashboards briefly flagged the data as corrupted. Engineers double-checked the code. Analysts reran the projections. Executives refreshed the dashboards again and again. The numbers stayed the same. This wasn't a glitch. This was real. And now Nike had a new problem. They didn't just sell out. They sold out too fast. Factories hadn't been scheduled for emergency production. Suppliers weren't prepared for overnight scaling. Shipping partners hadn't allocated capacity for a global surge. Every part of the pipeline had been built for normal growth, not for an explosion. By midday, internal emails started circulating with a new phrase appearing over and over. Supply chain exposure. In plain terms, Nike had just discovered a weakness in its own machine. A rookie had created demand faster than the world's largest sports brand could fulfill it. And as customer complaints began rolling in from buyers who couldn't check out in time, the pressure started rising inside headquarters. Because now the question wasn't how big this was. The question was how badly they had underestimated it. And that realization triggered something far more serious. Emergency meetings, executive calls, and a level of panic Nike hadn't felt in years. Because once a company like Nike loses control of momentum, it can disappear just as fast as it appeared. Next. Here is section 3, emergency at Nike HQ, 400 words in the same high-retention flow. By early afternoon, the mood inside Nike headquarters had shifted completely. This was no longer a technical issue. This was now a corporate emergency. Conference rooms that were normally booked days in advance were suddenly being cleared within minutes. Executives who had been in routine meetings were quietly pulled out and redirected upstairs. An unscheduled executive session was called. And this time, it wasn't about marketing strategy. It was about damage control. Live sales data was projected onto large screens around the room. Numbers refreshed every few seconds, each refresh making the situation look worse. What stunned them most wasn't just the revenue. It was the speed. Senior analysts pointed out that Shedeur's conversion rate was moving at a pace they had only ever seen during global sneaker launches. Not NFL drops. Not team merchandise. Sneaker culture events. And that comparison alone changed the tone of the meeting. Because sneaker launches are planned for chaos, NFL rookies are not. One insider later described the room as quiet but tense. No shouting. No celebration. Just people staring at numbers they couldn't explain. At some point during the meeting, a message was sent directly to upper leadership. According to multiple reports, even Phil Knight, Nike's founder, was briefed personally on what was happening. Not in a memo. Not in a weekly report. A direct call. When the founder of a company reaches out personally after a product launch, it usually means one thing. Something has gone seriously off script. Nike's CFO was reportedly reviewing the data line by line, looking for any sign that this was a temporary spike. It was. The trend was still climbing even after the inventory was gone. Search traffic for Shedeur Sanders was surging. Social media mentions were doubling by the hour. And waitlists were growing faster than production schedules could be rewritten. One executive reportedly asked a simple question in the room. How did we not see this coming? Because every system they trusted had failed. The projections, the models, the demographic assumptions, all wrong. And now they were facing a new problem. They had accidentally created scarcity. Not strategic scarcity. Uncontrolled scarcity. Fans wanted more. Media was starting to notice. Competitors were watching closely. And Nike had no product left to sell. In a business built on momentum, this was the most dangerous moment possible. Because when demand outruns supply this violently, there are only two outcomes. You either scale fast enough to survive it, or someone else steps in and takes it from you. And while Nike scrambled to stabilize their own operation, the real mystery was only beginning. Because nobody in that room could explain one critical detail. Who exactly was buying all of this? And why? Next. Here is section 4, who was actually buying, 400 words in the same high-retention style. When Nike's analysts finally slowed the data down, the numbers told a story nobody expected. This wasn't the usual NFL customer profile. Not middle-aged season ticket holders. Not die-hard fantasy players. Not collectors chasing team gear. The first shock came from age. Gen Z, a group that had largely ignored traditional football merchandise for years, suddenly made up the largest share of buyers. This was the same generation that skipped jerseys, mocked legacy branding, and treated most NFL gear as outdated. Now they were flooding the site in massive numbers. But that was only the beginning. When the gender data came in, the room went quiet. Nearly half of all purchases had come from women. Not gift buyers. Primary buyers. A demographic that Nike's own models had never associated with rookie NFL drops at this scale. For years, the assumption had been simple. Football merchandise sells to men. Sneakers sell to youth. Lifestyle branding belongs to basketball. Shedeur's drop shattered all three at once. Then the international numbers appeared. Orders weren't just coming from US cities. They were coming from London. From Paris. From Seoul. From Tokyo. Traffic patterns looked less like an NFL launch and more like a limited edition sneaker collaboration. Analysts compared it internally to Travis Scott releases. Same surge curves. Same geographic spread. Same speed. And that comparison raised a dangerous realization. This wasn't sports merchandise behavior. This was cultural product behavior. People weren't buying because they supported a team. They weren't buying because of a big game. They were buying because of identity. Because of image. Because of what the name represented. Social listening tools started flagging keywords that had nothing to do with football. Style. Confidence. Energy. Mindset. Fans weren't talking about stats. They were talking about how the logo looked in photos. How it fit into outfits. How it represented ambition. One internal report summarized it in a single line. This is not a jersey customer. And that's when Nike understood the real danger. They hadn't misjudged demand. They had misjudged the audience. They had launched this as a football product. But the market had received it as something else entirely. A lifestyle brand. A cultural signal. And once a product crosses that line, the rules change. Because now you're no longer competing with other athletes. You're competing with music. With fashion. With influencers. With culture itself. And that led directly to the next question that nobody could ignore anymore. What exactly about this drop had triggered this response? Because whatever it was, it clearly wasn't just the name. It was the symbol. The design. The detail that had quietly turned this into a movement. Next, here is section 5, the logo that sparked it all, 400 words in the same high-retention style. Once the attention shifted to the design itself, everything started to make sense. Because this wasn't just a random logo slapped onto a hoodie. Inside Nike's design archives, the SS crown had been through more than 15 different versions before it ever went public. Some were too close to Coach Prime's legacy. Some felt too generic. Some looked powerful but empty. Shedeur rejected most of them. He wasn't looking for something that celebrated the past. He wanted something that announced the future. Designers later revealed that the final version was built around a very specific idea. 2 interlocking S-shapes, subtle enough to feel modern, structured enough to feel royal. And above it, the faint outline of a crown. Not oversized. Not flashy. Almost hidden. The message was deliberate. Not "I'm famous. I'm building something." When the logo finally appeared online, it didn't explode overnight. It spread quietly. A few TikTok clips first. Then Instagram stories. Then background placements in music videos. Not paid placements. Organic ones. Artists wore it because they liked it. Influencers wore it because it photographed well. Athletes wore it because it felt different. Within days, the logo had left the football world entirely. It showed up in fashion edits. In gem reels. In lifestyle content. And that's when Nike realized what had happened. They hadn't launched merchandise. They had launched a symbol. A symbol that stood for ambition. For confidence. For moving ahead of the system. Fans weren't buying cotton and fabric. They were buying into an idea. One internal designer later said something that stuck. "We didn't design a logo, we designed a signal." And signals travel faster than products. Once the symbol took on a life of its own, the sellout became inevitable. Because now demand wasn't being driven by football seasons. It was being driven by culture cycles. Trends. Clips. Algorithms. A system that moves faster than any supply chain ever could. And while Nike was racing to redesign production schedules, another problem was already forming. Their rivals had seen the numbers. They had seen the audience. They had seen the cultural shift. And they understood something immediately. This wasn't just a Nike problem. This was a warning. Because if one rookie could build this kind of cultural gravity, then every brand in the industry had just fallen behind. And the scramble to respond was about to begin. Next, here is section 6, industry-wide shockwaves, 400 words continuing the flow. The first reaction outside Nike was disbelief. Then came panic. Within 24 hours of the sales figures leaking, emergency meetings were being called across the industry. Not quietly. Urgently. At Adidas, senior marketing executives reportedly gathered for an unscheduled strategy session before the next business day even began. Under Armour did the same. Smaller brands followed. The message was clear. Something fundamental had just changed. For years, the formula had been simple. Sign the athlete. Wait for performance. Let wins build the brand. Shedeur had just flipped the entire sequence. He built the brand first. And the performance hadn't even started yet. Scouts and brand strategists began revisiting their entire recruiting models. Instead of asking, "How good is this player?" they started asking a different question. How much influence does this player already have? Because what terrified competitors most wasn't the revenue. It was the timeline. This wasn't a 3-year arc. This happened before week 1, which meant the old rulebook was obsolete. Brands had been waiting for rookies to prove themselves on Sundays. Shedeur proved himself on launch day. Internal memos at rival companies reportedly used the same phrase again and again. Cultural acceleration. Young athletes were no longer waiting for endorsement deals. They were building platforms, followers, communities, personal brands. By the time companies showed up, the leverage had already shifted. One executive later admitted privately, "We're not scouting players anymore, we're scouting movements." And that realization triggered a wave of changes. Social teams were reassigned. Influencer budgets were doubled. Scouting departments began tracking TikTok growth alongside college stats. Because the fear was obvious. If Nike had almost missed this, who else had they missed? How many Shedeurs were already out there, building influence quietly before any brand noticed? And while competitors scrambled to rewrite their strategies, Nike faced an even more uncomfortable truth. They hadn't discovered this. They had almost lost it. If another brand had moved faster, if another deal had closed first, this moment wouldn't belong to them at all. And as the industry raced to catch up, a new tension surfaced. Because success at this scale creates a different kind of pressure. Not on marketing, on money, on contracts, on power. And inside Shedeur's camp, a conversation had already begun. One that would change the balance of control even further. Because the deal he had signed was no longer big enough to contain what he had become. Here is Section 7, Contract Pressure and Power Shift, 400 words continuing seamlessly. The contract had been written for a normal rookie. Not for this. When Shedeur signed his initial deal, it followed the standard framework. Performance incentives, sales thresholds, bonus triggers spread out over months. Carefully designed to limit risk. What nobody planned for was this. Within the first afternoon, multiple bonus clauses had already been activated. Sales targets that were supposed to take a season to reach were crossed in hours. Revenue ceilings that looked generous on paper suddenly felt small. Very small. By the 72-hour mark, internal finance teams were already flagging the agreement as structurally outdated. Not unfair. Outdated. Shedeur hadn't broken the contract. He had outgrown it. And that changed the dynamic immediately. Normally, rookies wait. They perform. They prove. They renegotiate later. This time, the leverage shifted before the first snap. According to multiple reports, informal renegotiation talks began quietly before week 1 had even ended. Not hostile, not confrontational, practical, because Nike understood the risk. If they tried to slow this down, if they tried to hold him to the original structure, someone else would be waiting. And this time it wouldn't be subtle. It would be aggressive. Bidding wars. Equity offers. Lifetime deals. Shedeur's team knew it too. For the first time in years, a rookie camp wasn't negotiating from weakness. They were negotiating from control. Control of audience. Control of attention. Control of culture. One advisor later summarized it simply. This is no longer an endorsement, this is a partnership. And partnerships come with different rules. Different money. Different power. But even as the business side accelerated, another truth lingered over everything. Hype fades. Influence fades. Culture moves on. Unless one thing happens. You deliver on the field. Because no matter how powerful the brand becomes, football still has the final say. And inside every boardroom, every meeting, every renegotiation, there was one unspoken question nobody could avoid. What happens if he doesn't live up to this? Because if the performance falls short, the empire collapses just as fast as it was built. And that made the next phase the most dangerous one of all. Not in the boardroom, not in the factory, but on the field, where everything would finally be tested. Next, here is Section 8, Can he sustain it on the field? 400 words continuing the story. All the momentum in the world means nothing if it collapses on Sundays. Nike knew it. The fans knew it. Shedeur knew it. Because football has a way of stripping away illusion fast. Training camp became the first quiet test. Not in front of cameras. Not under stadium lights. but in closed practices, film rooms, and daily reps. Early reports started filtering out. Completion percentages climbing. Reads getting faster. Decision-making sharper than expected for a rookie. Not spectacular. Efficient. And that mattered more. Because hype survives on flash. Trust survives on consistency. Coaches began praising something that never shows up on highlight reels. Preparation. How early he arrived. How much film he watched. How quickly he adjusted. Teammates noticed it too. Veterans don't buy into marketing. They buy into competence. And slowly, quietly, belief started forming inside the locker room. Fans picked up on it online. Not from press releases. From small details. Clips of footwork drills. Short throws under pressure. Body language in huddles. This didn't feel manufactured. It felt earned. And that distinction was everything. Because viewers can forgive slow development. They can't forgive fake confidence. Shedeur's brand worked because it matched what people were seeing. No forced slogans. No overproduced narratives. Just a player growing into the moment. One analyst put it bluntly. You can sell shirts without touchdowns. You can't sell belief. And belief is what keeps a brand alive when the novelty fades. Because the real challenge was never the first drop. It was the second. And the third. And the season after that. Could the name stay relevant when the headlines moved on? Could the logo survive a bad game? Could the culture survive adversity? That's where most hype cycles die. Not at the peak, but at the first real setback. And that's why this phase mattered more than any sellout. Because now the story was no longer about business. It was about identity. Was Shedeur a moment? Or was he a foundation? The answer to that would decide everything that came next. Because if the performance held, this wouldn't be remembered as a viral launch. It would be remembered as the day a new kind of superstar began. Next, here is the conclusion: a new era begins. 400 words to complete the script. By the time the first month of the season arrived, one thing was already clear. This was never just a merch story. It was a blueprint. Shedeur Sanders had shown something the sports world had never seen this early. You no longer had to wait for permission. You no longer had to wait for championships. You no longer had to wait for legends to retire. You could build first. Culture first. Audience first. Identity first. And let performance catch up. For decades, the system worked in one direction. Teams created stars. Brands followed. Fans reacted. Shedeur reversed it. He arrived with an audience already built. With influence already proven. With leverage already established. Nike didn't create this moment. They stumbled into it. And nearly lost control of it. The 8-minute sellout wasn't the headline. The headline was what it represented. A shift in power. From corporations to creators. From institutions to individuals. From approval to ownership. Because once an athlete controls attention, everything else follows. Contracts change. Scouting changes. Marketing changes. Even how rookies are valued changes. This was no longer about who could throw the farthest. It was about who could move people. And now every brand in the industry is chasing the same question. Who's next? Not the next great quarterback. The next cultural force. The next athlete who understands that in this era, fame isn't given. It's built. Slowly. Publicly. Strategically. The irony is that this all started with a simple product page at 10:00 a.m. No fireworks. No countdown. No grand announcement. Just 8 minutes that quietly changed an industry. And the most dangerous part. This story is only at the beginning. Because if Shedeur delivers on the field, if the wins come, if the performances hold, this won't be remembered as a rookie success story. It will be remembered as the moment sports marketing entered a new era. An era where athletes don't wait to be chosen. They choose themselves. And the rest of the world has no choice but to follow.